interpreter here at the museum and the fiddler.
And I'm Davis Tierney, and I'm the Director of Interpretation here at the museum.
Yeah, the tune you just heard was an old country dance jig called Haste to the Wedding. And today we're going to take a quick bit and just talk about the music of America and where it came from, its influences. That's the type of music that you would have heard
It's kind of pre-American Revolution, right? Like that's an English country dance tune.
Yeah, English country dance.
So not that they stopped playing it the second the Revolution happened, but that it's around before America as a country exists.
That's right. And being a jig in 6/8, those tunes had a tendency to fade away as some other tunes you'll hear, some 4/4 tunes, hornpipes, cotillions, and reels kind of took over in America as the main thing, whereas in the old world, the British world, they still today play lots of jigs, very heavily jig-oriented, which is 6/8 time, or 12/8 time, which is a type of meter that you use to dance to.
So the next tune we're going to play for you guys is one you probably all recognize, but we're going to tell you some stuff about it that you may not have previously known. Everybody knows Yankee Doodle. It's the 4th of July, perfect time to play it. Yankee Doodle is in many ways really one of the first American patriotic songs. But the funny thing is it traces its origins to British people trash-talking Americans. So the first versions of the lyrics were supposedly penned by a British surgeon who was serving with the British Army during the French and Indian War, obviously alongside a lot of American troops, or what they would have called at the time provincial troops. Provincial troops pretty consistently had a bad reputation in the period, and that is reflected by the first iteration of the lyrics of Yankee Doodle. It is this British surgeon making fun of the comparatively poor soldiering of these Yankee soldiers. So the lyrics are a little bit different from the ones you may have heard. There's 2 verses and a chorus I'll just belt out real quick for you guys. The first one, to the same tune that you know, is Yankee Doodle's Brother Ephraim, he sold his cow and bought him a commission. Then he went to Canada to fight for the nation. They're referring to Brother Ephraim, this Yankee, this bumpkin, basically joining the army by selling his cow, which is not a very conventional way to go become an officer in British service, and buying a commission so he can be a British officer. And then going up to Canada, where the French had all their defenses during the French Indian War, to fight for the nation of Great Britain. The next verse is, but when Ephraim he came home, he proved an arrant coward. He wouldn't fight the Frenchmen, therefore fear of being devoured. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Brother Ephraim's a coward, essentially. They're saying that the American troops are not worth having in the woods of Canada. That's corroborated by a lot of different sources that talk about a single Indian war whoop being enough to scare away an entire company of provincial troops. So these guys are not well thought of. And finally, the chorus, so instead of Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy, etc., is, how am I forgetting this already? Sheep's head and vinegar, buttermilk and tansy. Boston is a Yankee town, sing hey doodle dandy. So obvious similarities to the chorus we know, but it is a little different. What they're doing there with the sheep's head and vinegar, buttermilk and tansy is making fun of the comparatively bad food that American troops are eating as compared to what the King's troops are eating, essentially, what the British troops are eating. So the whole thing is a big dig against Americans broadly. Now, fast forward a little bit to the American Revolution, and these are lyrics that most people know. I am not 100% on exactly what year the version we know came around, but essentially what happens is the Americans turn the song on its head. Rather than making it into something where the British are making fun of them, ha ha ha, you're a bunch of bumpkins, they say, yes, we are a bunch of bumpkins, and we're going to kick your butt. What are you going to do about it, bud? So that's where we start to get the lyrics that have a much more sort of martial tone to them. So there's the ones that you guys all know. Yankee Doodle came to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Okay, a couple weird things in there, a couple things that not a lot of people realize. So the pony thing is sort of the equivalent of driving into town in a beat-up golf cart. It's not a real horse, so it's something that he should be ashamed of in the eyes of these British people, or in this case, the eyes of the Americans who are pretending to write for the British people. And then stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. We got to unpack the word macaroni now. So don't think mac and cheese. We're not talking about the nice pasta dish. When we say macaroni in an 18th century context, we're referring to essentially an 18th century fashionista, or what we today almost might call a hipster. Somebody who takes fashion to the extreme. there are a lot of satirical prints, so joking comics basically, from the period that show macaronis with these massive 10-foot tall wigs and these stupid tiny little hats and the most ridiculous clothes, and it's all really over the top and like mildly effeminate. And it's something that the British will often throw at the French as an insult. They're a bunch of macaronis. They're trying to imply that they are effeminate. But what they're saying here is that Yankee Doodle is such a bumpkin that he thinks that sticking a feather in his cap is high fashion. So I've done plenty of talking. The last verse we'll run through real quick just to talk about how the verses change and to talk about sort of the martial roots of this song, the military roots of this song. They changed the verses largely to move towards talking about a military encampment. So, Father and I went down to camp along with Captain Gooding, and there we saw the men and boys as thick as hasty pudding. There's a bunch of different verses talking about meeting General Washington and all the cool things they see while they're there, people shooting guns, big cannons, all kinds of stuff. But the idea now is that these Yankee Doodle bumpkins have formed an army, and that army is coming to kick your butt. So with that said, we're going to play.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Bought him a commission, then he went to Canada to fight for the nation. Buttermilk and Tennessee, Boston is a Yankee town. Sing hey doodle dandy, Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony. Stuck a feather in his cap and called him macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step and let the girls be handy.
All right.
There you go. That's that.
That is that.
This thing I'm playing on, I'll talk about it super briefly, is a gourd banjo. So it's like a banjo you might know, except that the body, rather than being made of wood or having a modern resonator on it, is made of a gourd. And these instruments, this idea of making a stringed instrument out of a gourd with a neck, is actually an influence from West African culture. So if you ever, anytime you're listening to bluegrass or old-time music or anything with a banjo, you have the influence of enslaved West Africans coming to North America to thank for it. This one is a very 1850s style banjo. You can tell that just by how the head is cut. But instruments like this are around in the Americas as early as the late 18th century.
Yeah, that version got really popular in the Caribbean as well.
Yeah.
The Caribbean slaves kind of made it what it had kind of a Spanish influence with the tension keys, and so there's a lot going on there. But it's it hails from West Africa as an instrument. So.
You want to do a solo piece, Zach?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about here at the museum. A lot of people ask about the fiddle because I'm always playing it, and so they'll ask about where these tunes come from. Is a fiddle a violin? That's the number one question. The instrument's a violin. The fiddle has a long, foggy history of it. I think it's a medieval term, possibly Old English or Welsh. That was a bowed instrument that was 3-stringed. It was a box, not shaped like this. This is 1550s, and it hasn't changed since. Italian. So, I'll play some styles of music. One of the best representations to give you all of the connection between the New World and the Old World. There's many of them out there, but like I said before about the 4/4, the reel pattern of dancing became more prominent, and the 4/4 reel possibly originated 9th, 10th century in Scotland, and it became really popular in the 1500s and 1600s. But the Scots had their own type of reel that they played called a strathspey, and that had a dotted 8-note rhythm. So just real quick, if you're not a musician, or you are and you understand that, what I'm talking about is straight playing would be. So if you dot those notes, one gets a longer measure, the other one gets a shorter. So it'd be. So it's the same thing, same notes, same timing, but you're quickening up to the first one. So I'm going to play a tune that's the melody by and large stays the same. In Scotland, it was known as the Highlanders' Farewell to Ireland, and in Ireland, the tune later became just known as Farewell to Ireland. And later on, in America, it was played in Carolina and the Virginia colonies by Scots and British immigrants, and they just called it Highlanders' Farewell. So, I will go ahead and run through these real quick, and you'll see the very subtle changes, the differences in how they go. So. So the last one was the American version, and what they often did with those reels was not to talk down to the American way of playing, but it became a little less reverent, a little more sloppy's not the right word, but it's loose. It's a lot looser. It's more mountainy feeling. So in 18th century Scotland, it was very regal. The dancing was very specific, very tight, and the fiddle playing would have been very much more precise and reverent. So it loosened up a little bit, but the melody is still there, as you kind of saw through those three tunes. So, thank you.
So the last thing we're going to talk about today is our national anthem and national anthems broadly. So, fun fact, the national anthem that we know as our national anthem, the StarSpangled Banner, didn't actually get adopted by Congress as our national anthem until 1931. Woodrow Wilson, shout out to the Woodrow Wilson Library just down the road here in Stanton, made an executive order in 1916 making it the national anthem. It doesn't get confirmed by Congress until the 30s. There's a lot of debate before then about what the national anthem would be, and one popular proposal that not a lot of people have ever heard of, and I'll just noodle through a verse of it really quick, is called Hail Columbia. Today it's used as sort of the vice presidential tune of state. So when the vice president walks into a room and he needs to be announced, the way that you would play Hail to the chief for the president, you might play Hail Columbia for the vice president. So here's the melody. It sounds very, you can see this being played on a fife and drum very easily. the melody to it. It has a very different feeling to the Star-Spangled Banner, obviously. I think it just screams fife and drum, to me anyway. But,
I agree.
Whereas the Star-Spangled Banner wants to be, sung by one of these crazy virtuoso vocalists. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. So this is a really cool song in a lot of ways, but there does have some controversy surrounding it. So the verse that everybody knows, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed the twilight's last gleaming," that is referring to Francis Scott Key, the writer of the song, sitting on a ship out in the Chesapeake Bay, looking at Fort McHenry. Fort McHenry was the only major fortification blocking the British Navy during the War of 1812 from making it into Baltimore Harbor. They had already crushed the American Army at the Battle of Bladensburg at this point. They had already burned the White House to the ground, so things are not looking good for the American cause at this point. It looks like these guys might come and burn even more of our stuff. And Fort McHenry is the thing that holds them. So as the sun sets, Francis Scott Key can't obviously see what's going on. He can no longer see the fort. He can't see the flag. But that's when we get into the remainder of the tune. So, "Say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed the twilight's last gleaming, these broad stripes and bright stars of the perilous fight, or the ramparts of the fort which we fought were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there." Rocket's red glare is referring to a fairly new type of artillery in the early 19th century. That is it's a rocket, a big metal cone that spirals through the air to stabilize it in flight and explodes over its target. And obviously it looks kind of like a firework. So the rocket's red glare, the incoming British fire coming into the fort, the bombs bursting in air, big Looney Tunes looking iron mortar bombs detonating over Fort McHenry. What does that tell Francis Scott Key? It tells him the fort hasn't surrendered, because if the fort had surrendered, then hey, they wouldn't be shooting anymore. So even though he can't see the flag at that moment, the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. So that verse is really cool. The verse that creates controversy has a line in it that is kind of interesting. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. So the line that is controversial in there is, "No refuge could save the hireling and slave." There's been some debate about this, but a number of very prominent scholars, such as Alan Taylor at UVA, have surmised that the hireling and slave is referring to formerly enslaved people who, when the British came into the Chesapeake Bay, fled their masters and were recruited by the British military's colonial marines and fought at the Battle of Bladensburg. And essentially, the fact that they get a shout out here shows that Key is really mad specifically about this. These guys burn, not these guys specifically, but the British burn the White House. They've been attacking our country, they've been impressing our sailors, but this is the thing he gets hung up on. So that right there basically describes a good part of the controversy surrounding the tune. But it is a really, really compelling tune, and Zach and I are going to play a nice version of it for you right now.
Yes.
I very much love that first verse. It's a really cool verse. The idea of Americans prevailing over the odds, I think, is just a very American idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, here's the national anthem.
All right. 1, 2, 3, ready, 2. 4th, everyone.
Yeah, happy 4th of July to you all. Hope you'll join us for some of our other programs today. If you've enjoyed anything you've seen so far or want to support us in some other way for our virtual 4th of July, take a look down in the description. You'll find a link to the American Frontier Culture Foundation. Any donations that you guys can give are greatly appreciated so that we can keep doing all the cool things we do and telling all the parts of America's story.
Yes.
So, thank you. Have a good 4th.
Stay healthy.